I still remember the way the room felt right before I touched the piano, thick, heavy, like everyone had already agreed on who I was without bothering to ask. I could hear the whispers behind me, soft enough to pretend they weren't cruel, sharp enough that I knew exactly what they meant. Is she serious? That's the cleaner's kid, right? This should be interesting. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because I'd heard versions of that sentence my whole life. I stood there in my plain black uniform, hands folded the way I'd been taught, eyes lowered out of habit. My mom was somewhere near the wall trying to make herself smaller than the marble columns behind her. She'd spent 20 years cleaning that house, learning how to disappear so other people could feel important. And I had learned it too, not because I was weak, but because when you grow up surrounded by people with power, you learn early that talent doesn't scare them. Ambition does. They don't mind you being good in private. They panic when you're good in public. The woman hosting the event, Mrs. Caldwell, stood near the front diamonds, catching the light as she smiled, the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. She glanced at me like she was checking a chair for dust. "Your staff," she said quietly. Like that explained everything. "You don't need to be up here." Her tone wasn't angry. It was worse, amused, certain. I nodded because that's what I'd always done. Because pushing back usually costs people like us more than it's worth. But something in me didn't move. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was years of swallowing things I never digested. Or maybe it was the piano sitting there silent, waiting, like it had been waiting for me my whole life. I didn't grow up with music lessons or recitals or applause. I grew up with late nights, empty rooms, and a piano no one thought I deserved to touch. I learned to play the way some people learn to pray, quietly, desperately, when no one's watching. At night, when the house was asleep, I'd sit at the bench and let my hands speak the words I wasn't allowed to say during the day. No audience, no approval. Just truth. My mom hated it, not because I was bad, but because I was too good. People notice gifts like that, she used to whisper, and when they notice, they take. She wasn't wrong. She'd seen it happen to my father. He had the same hands, long fingers, gentle touch, music in his bones. And he believed foolishly that talent was enough, that if you were good, the world would make room for you. Instead, it shut the door in his face and locked it. So my mom taught me survival instead of dreaming. She taught me how to fold myself into the background, how to keep my head down, how to be grateful just to be allowed in the room. And for a long time I listened, until that night. Because that night I watched mediocrity dressed in confidence get applauded like genius. I watched people clap for effort they'd already decided was worthy before the first note was played. I watched arrogance pass itself off as excellence. And for the first time staying quiet felt like lying. Then someone said it not to me but about me. "She probably can't even read music." The words landed soft and loud at the same time. A man near the piano, one of the judges I later learned, looked over, really looked at me. Not my uniform, not my posture, my hands. "You," he said, "do you play?" Mrs. Caldwell laughed before I could answer. "Oh, don't be ridiculous," she said quickly. "She's just—" I asked her, he said, calm but firm. The room leaned in, not with hope, with curiosity. The kind people have when they expect a car crash. I could have said no. I could have stepped back. I could have saved my mom the fear in her eyes. But I was tired of disappearing. "Yes," I said, quietly. "Clearly, I do." The silence after that was almost respectful, almost. Mrs. Caldwell leaned in close, her voice dropping. "If you embarrass yourself," she whispered, "you embarrass all of us. And I promise you, consequences will follow." I looked at her then, really looked. And I realized something strange. She wasn't afraid I'd fail. She was afraid I wouldn't. I sat down at the piano. My hand shook at first, not because I didn't know what to do, but because I knew exactly what I was about to lose if I did it. Safety, anonymity, the thin protection invisibility offers. The first notes came out careful, restrained, polite. People relaxed. I could feel it. They settled back into their seats, satisfied. And then I stopped playing politely. I let the music breathe. I let it stretch and ache and remember all the nights it had kept me alive. I let it carry every swallowed word, every lowered gaze, every time I'd been told to stay in my place. The room changed, not all at once, but enough. Whispers died mid-sentence. Someone dropped a glass. The judge leaned forward, eyes sharp, now alert. I wasn't thinking anymore. I wasn't proving anything. I was telling the truth the only way I knew how. When the last note faded, no one moved. 3 heartbeats passed, maybe 4. Then someone clapped. Not loud, not dramatic, honest. The applause spread uneven at first, then unstoppable. People stood without realizing they were standing. I stayed seated, hands resting on my lap, breathing like I'd just surfaced from deep water. The judge approached me slowly. "Where did you study?" he asked. I swallowed. I didn't. That answer hit harder than the music. "Who taught you?" "My father," I said. Before he disappeared, Mrs. Caldwell went pale. That's when everything unraveled. The judge's expression shifted, recognition snapping into place like a memory he'd buried. He said my father's name out loud and the room froze. My mom stepped forward, then voice shaking but strong. She told the story she'd been hiding for decades, about accusations, blacklists, pride disguised as power. About how one rejection had cost my father his career, his dignity, his family. Mrs. Caldwell tried to interrupt, tried to laugh it off, tried to control the room like she always had. But power changes fast when truth shows up uninvited. By the end of the night, I wasn't staff anymore. I wasn't invisible. I wasn't a rumor. I was seen. They offered me opportunities, scholarships, mentors, stages I'd never imagined stepping on. People who'd ignored me hours earlier suddenly wanted my story, my time, my presence. I said yes to some, no to others. Because winning isn't about taking everything you're offered. It's about choosing what doesn't cost you your soul. A year later, I played on a real stage under real lights with my mom in the front row, not hiding, not apologizing for existing, just proud. And sometimes I think about that room, that moment before the first note when everyone thought they knew exactly who I was. They weren't wrong about where I came from. They were wrong about where that meant I belonged. So let me ask you something. When someone underestimates you, do you think it's because they don't see your value, or because admitting it would force them to question their own?